Hey YouTube, Beastie! Again, so this is another one I'm selling from my pal Ivor, who I saw a couple of years ago. He had a shot at one of my Japanese bases, so that's one of them. He had a shot of, and he was like, oh, so he ended up buying half a dozen, and he's given me a couple to sell, 3 to sell. I think you just get to a certain point where you've got so many bases you can't do anything with them. So this is a Hondo H1015. One of the rare Hondos, well, same as mine. This one has been painted though, so it should have a headstock. Well, not necessarily the same as this. Mine's actually heavier. Bam. That's what the logo could look like. It could either be that, and see it says professional on the truss rod cover. Those are the professional series are the Japanese Hondos. There are a lot of Hondos, and if you look them up on eBay and stuff, I assume it's the same. I've not really looked them up for a while. All say made in Japan, and none of them are, apart from the ones that say professional on the truss rod cover, or this one which has lost its truss rod cover at some point, but it's the same base. You don't get, if it's this shape, it's one of the Japanese ones. So what happened was Hondo made guitars, and they're pretty bad, Korean ones, like in the 70s, and they're pretty bad. So what they did was they got a couple of Japanese factories to make guitars for them for a couple of years. I think it's 1980 and 1981. And this is kind of my theory. Well, they did hire 2 factories. They hired Tokai, and Tokai built them a Fender lead copy. You know, it's kind of not, it's not on the wall anymore. Not unlike the Roadster. It's kind of like, it's not quite a Strat. Hondo lead 2 or the Fender lead 2, one of them. And a P bass. I'm not sure what else. That's the sort of Fendery ones. They were made by Tokai. They also had a Dan Electro Longhorn, like a 36 fret thing. You know, the one John Entwistle plays the bass version of. It's like big. It's got long horns. These short horns. The horns on it go right down to here somewhere. It's got extra frets. They also made that by Tokai, and they got Matsumoku to build this one. There's a few of these. So if you find a Hondo that looks like a Les Paul, it's not a Japanese one, even if the advert says it is. There is a sort of Les Paul. There's this one. There's a guitar version which looks like this. There's a slightly more expensive guitar version which isn't a bolt-on neck like this. It's a set neck, and it's got 3. Kind of looks a wee bit like a Washburn Hawk Falcon type thing. You just get the 3 centre strips down the middle like you get in a Westone Thunder. That kind of idea on it. It's like a slightly more expensive one. There's an 8-string version of this, which to be honest I'd probably buy, let's be honest, if I saw it. And then there's a sort of Les Paul Junior, which my pal Bob has one, which is it's a wee bit like the Yamaha SG, actually, looking at it, isn't it? It's kind of like that. It is a single cut, but it's a flat top. It's not like a normal, like a Les Paul standard looking one. Those ones are definitely Korean. So what they did was they got the Japanese factories to make some guitars, and what my theory is when they'd ordered however many thousands of guitars they'd ordered, and went, right, well, we've just ordered a big pile of guitars, can we come and see how they're built just to make sure you're doing it right? And then the folk from Hondo went, or Samick, I think the company was, I don't know when it was started being called Samick, whether it was always called Samick, went over and then saw how Matsumoku were building guitars, and then went, oh, that's interesting. Take notes. So after these, Hondo are much better guitars. They're all right. They're basically kind of more like what you get now. As a modern sub £1,000 guitar, it's kind of what you get as those Hondos. There are some really good ones. The Formula 1 are particularly good. There's the Fame series. They do a cheap Hondo called it's a Strat copy that's not. It's all right, but it's not as good as a modern Squire. But there's sort of more deluxe-y ones are pretty good. I used to have at least half a dozen. I had a 12-string Strat and a few other ones kicking about, but I got rid of them, and that's the one I kept because it was a Japanese one, and became a bit of a snob because Japanese stuff's just better. It just is. So what you have here is, as I said, this one's been painted black. Mine was black, but it had sticker damage on it. It had obviously been covered with stickers at some point before whoever it was sold it on eBay took them off with a wallpaper scraper or something, so yeah, the top was just scratched to bits. It looked terrible. So now it kind of looks, it was meant to be like Tony the Tiger from the Frosties thing, but it actually looks a wee bit more like a SoundCloud file somehow. If you remember SoundCloud, I think I've actually still got a SoundCloud. Yeah, so this one has, the headstock's been painted over, so it no longer says Hondo or Hondo 2. When they started, the earlier ones say Hondo 2 on them, and I've actually only ever seen another one like mine that's got that H logo on it. That's like the later logo which you get on after 81 or 82 or something like that. You see that logo being used a bit more. That was a good point. No, this one does actually have a serial number on the back. When the back plate's put upside down. Does this one have a serial number? I didn't think it did. Oh, it does. 1060, and this is 002. So 06, 02. Yep. Okay. So going what I think might be the case. I think the 1 might stand for 81, and the 06 might stand for July 81. Which may or may not be right. That would make this one February 1980, so one of the earliest ones. But the Matsumoku, so they're all the same. It basically feels exactly the same as mine. There is no difference. There is a version you can get. It was it had a slightly different model number, but it came with a DiMarzio pickup. And Hondo later on, after they'd gone back to Korea, did have an option for a DiMarzio pickup loaded version of a few of their guitars. They kind of bit like an H1015D for the DiMarzio one. Those ones aren't Japanese. Yeah, so we've got maple neck. It's 32-inch scale, so it's probably my favourite scale. It's not 30-inch like an EBO or a Mustang or something. It's not 34-inch like a P-Bass. It's in the middle. Works quite well. This one has had this strap button's been moved from there to there, and this strap button's in its original position, so it's a little bit neck heavy. Whereas mine, one of the first things I did was put the strap button there, so this one isn't neck heavy. It is actually heavier. Oh, jeez. They're not light, but back in 1980, there was a thing. I don't know how true it is. It's like heavy, better tone, better sustain. So they intentionally made guitars really heavy. There was a point in sort of late 70s, early 80s when what you wanted was as heavy as it could possibly be and as much brass on it as you could possibly get for sustain, which is... It could be true. Maybe that's why it sounds the way it does. Maybe that's why it sounds really good. So you got like a P-bass pickup, volume and a tone. I think I changed the knobs. I like the knobs with the notches on them, so that's what I put on mine. You got a 3-point, similar to an Epiphone type bridge. Oh, that saddle's been replaced. So this has got a slightly odd saddle. It looks fine though. Sitting at the right place. Yeah, so... So obviously these are amazing because I've got one, and if I've got one it must be good. Or if I've got one and I kept it for more than 6 months, and I've had that for years. Partly because I've painted it a stupid colour, so I don't think anyone would buy it unless there's someone who's really wanting to give me lots of money for it. I would want more for that one than I'm asking for this one. Just because it's got this is still this total professional range. It's an absolutely rock solid bass, but it doesn't have mine doesn't have the collector value on it anyway by being all original. With these sort of things, they made a lot of them. They sold really well because they were so flipping good. This is kind of the same era as your West Tone Thunders, and well, made in the same factory as a West Tone Thunder. Basically, it's a West Tone Thunder in it. When you actually think about it, it's just a slightly shorter scale. It's like a sort of. There's an Ibanez. There's actually one for sale just now down in the Shire. I had one, an Ibanez GAX bass, kind of not entirely dissimilar to this. This is better though, but because it's a higher end one. So it's got a 3-piece neck. You can actually see. One of the things I really liked about it, see this heel. The neck obviously is just normal, but it's got an extra bit put on it to make it like a smooth transition, which is completely unnecessary. Probably cost quite a bit to do, so you would never get it in a modern guitar, but it's better than just having a straight heel, so it kind of makes it feel like a smooth access neck joint or whatever. Feels a bit more like a through neck or something. But these things play amazing. I mean, it's a fantastic bass. When I got that one, two of my pals bought one immediately after. One of them bought the one exactly the same, apart from his is a Sunburst. And the other guy in his band bought a West Tone Thunder, because I said, oh, West Tone Thunder's probably very similar to it. And it kind of is. But I mean, these are fantastic basses. I would probably move the strap button to down there. Actually, if you look at it, the rack, there's actually an extra hole there, implying that it, maybe whoever it was had a wee go at trying to make it less neck heavy. It's not, it's not a Thunderbird. It's like, let's be clear, it's not a Thunderbird, but it is a little bit on the neck heavy. It wants to sit horizontally, whereas a Thunderbird wants that headstock on the floor. This doesn't. It wants to sit like that, which I think maybe, see if you're one of those people that maybe played the bass high up, it's probably perfectly balanced. I just think that, see, just by moving the strap button to there, it would make it sit at the angle I want, which is kind of that. Is it Randy Rhoads? I think apparently Randy Rhoads was one of the first people to do that. What you basically got is like a really good P bass. And I suppose they always say this about the short scale basses, and I don't have wee hands, but it's like for guitarists, it's like pure find the bass a little bit daunting. I don't know how true that is. Although some people do have really small hands, actually. I don't want to mention his name. Liam has got really small hands. So I gave him a shot of that 8 string. He was just like, whoa. So just having short fingers, I've just got big fingers, so I'm alright. But I still do like the short scale. You don't have the same issues you do with the 30 inch, where you have to be a little bit careful with the fat string. It tends to fart out a little bit, just because the tension's not quite enough. It's been that long, just that little bit extra makes it not a problem anymore, so you can just play it like a normal P bass. But the neck on it is phenomenal. Really, the tuners are just the stock ones, so they'll be Goto, because the bridge will be a Goto as well. The pickups will be Goto, assuming these are original pickups. Mine look more like DiMarzio's. I don't know. Maybe that's the DiMarzio one. I think these things might have had model numbers on stickers on the back, but it's 40 years old, so the stickers have been sweated off or just fallen off. Yeah, so I mean, basically what I'm doing here is I'm selling this from a pal. I'm not going to fight for a pure amazing price for it. I'm going to sell it for. It'll still be in the same. It'll still be in Squire money, and you're getting a bass that's Bender level for Squire money, basically. And it's also a little bit more interesting. Do you know what I mean? That's a little bit cooler and a bit more interesting than just having another boring bass. Although I have to admit, I do really like B basses. But just be careful, because this could be a gateway drug, like mine was. Technically my first gateway drug was the 8-string Washburn, which actually my pal Scott's got just now. But I just bought that. The thing that was mental about that was the fact it was 8 strings. It was nuts. It wasn't really until I got that I started realising, hold on, see these Japanese ones, they're awfully good. Just like anything from the 80s, or anything up till, they kind of start teetering off towards the end of the 80s. I mean, that's what, 86, 87 are still rock solid. So anything from the late 70s to the late 80s made in Japan, you're getting a guitar that would be thousands of pounds to buy now. The quality difference is huge. I mean, again, as I say this about a lot of these guitars, I go into go into a guitar shop and try and find a bass built as well as this for under £1,000. Not going to happen. I've actually got a Fender Mexican jazz bass through there. Very nice, very nice, very nice. Is it as good as this? Well, it's a jazz bass, so it's worth an awful lot more money, and it probably looks better, but it's not. Is it as well built? No, nothing like as well built. It's built cheap. This is built expensive and not particularly not built to sell. Does that make sense? Basically, this, if you think back, I think part of the problem with this is see if you go back to the 80s, you didn't have the internet and stuff, so all you had to try these things is you would actually go into a shop and try. I'm going to buy a bass, so you go into the shop and try half a dozen basses, and that's why people bought these, because they were amazing, and they were better than. Is it better than my EBO? Maybe, you know, it's like they were better than what you could get from the big brands, but they cost half as much. So that was where these sold by word of mouth and people playing them, rather than advertising campaigns and having celebrity endorsements. I mean, where would like Gibson Vendor be without celebrity endorsements? Nowhere. But I mean, it's just great. So I would totally just buy this. I'm going to put it on Facebook Marketplace. It has been painted matte black, which some people like. I don't like matte black guitars. I don't know why you would like matte black guitars. So it's been painted matte black, but nothing else has really been faffed about with it. As I said, there has been a few other attempts at putting the strap button in different places. I would probably do what I did with mine and put it in the middle of the neck plate. The only thing you've got to be worried about doing that is make sure that you don't use too long a screw, so you don't screw. And mine, I put it slap bang between these two screws, but obviously there's a truss rod running in there, so if you drill too far in there, you'll hit the truss rod. Don't do that. Use a short stumpy screw to screw it on there, and it sorts the weight thing. I actually thought that one had atrocious strings on it, but it doesn't actually seem to be that bad when I dug it out. So I will be using that again. I have used that in the Sabbath band. That was one of the ones when I first joined the band. I was trying to get a reaction from the guitarist, and he was just up here, yeah, whatever. It's like, come on, Tiff, I turned up with a guitar painted like Tony the Tiger, and you're not going to say, going to no use that bass. You never did. Eventually did get a comment off him a couple of weeks ago when I bought the wee tenor bass, you know, the wee Encore red one. That was when we went, look, I have to say something. I got a fucking reaction, because I've run hundreds of the most inappropriate basses I've got, taking them into that Sabbath band, and everyone's up here, yeah, whatever, as long as it sounds good. Like, but it's pointy and it's got spikes on it, you can't play this in Sabbath, and it's like, alright, well, fair enough, yeah, probably. So at least I got a reaction one time, but I didn't get a reaction from that. The thing is, it sounded really good, and it plays amazing. And it sounded... I'm playing in the house, right? Okay, I'm playing through a gig and amp, but it's not at super volume. You really notice the difference. Apart from the feel, it's the sound when you take this level of guitar, this level of bass into the studio. They'll take this in and A/B it. I've been noticing doing that because I'm in the Sabbath band. I'm using two basses because some of the songs are in standard tuning and some of them are in drop C and C sharp tuning. And I've noticed that taking in a bass one week and then taking in another bass next week, you're not really going to notice the difference between the two, because, you know, someone might have adjusted the amp to a slightly different room, all that. But if you're going from one bass to another one, you really notice the difference. I mean, that's why I get rid of the Epiphone EBO, because it sounded fine on its own, but then when I went on to any of the Japanese stuff, it was like pure, it's like, what would I say? It's like the T-bone steak flavoured oysters, or a T-bone steak. It's like, yeah, it does taste a bit like T-bone steak, it does, but this is an actual T-bone steak. It's kind of that, maybe not quite as extreme as that, but it's kind of getting that way. The Epiphone is miles better than an Epiphone EBO. It just is. If you ever play one, if you've got an EBO, I challenge you, come up here, play this, and then if you think your EBO is better, then I don't think it's possible. I was going to say I'd give you it, but then someone might come up and lie. But it's a better bass. And I do have a thing for maple fingerboards. Yep. And again, I love the P-bass pickup. I do have a fair few basses that have more than one pickup, like even the jazz bass. To me, every time I pick up a jazz bass, I put both the volumes of both the pickups at full, and you turn one of them down a little bit until it sounds sort of like a P-bass pickup. That's the sound I want. The PJ thing, you know, like having a jazz bass pickup in here, none of that really interests me. I just want a bass, and I want it to sound like this. This would totally do me if I only had one bass. I would never get away with one bass because I need two for the Sabbath band, but if in the Sabbath band I decided just to play everything C sharp, I only need one bass. This is the only bass you need. And you could take this in and with your pals and go, I've got a £1,000 bass, and it's like I put it up against this, and it's like, okay, I bet you it looks better. I bet you that's where the betterness ends though. Once you get used to the quality of these things, you can't go wrong. Yeah, so these things are fantastic. I can't trade anything for this because it's not mine. I'm just selling it. My pal, it's like, I haven't played mine in ages. It does look rather good sitting on the wall though. It's kind of, I think that'll stay there for a couple of weeks just because it's got some pizzazz to it. Even though I don't particularly like Steel Panther, I can see Steel Panther using something like that or something just a little bit different. I always think that, see when you're playing gigs, especially if you're on like a bill with like 3 or 4 other bands. It's like, which band was that? Is that the one with the tiger coloured bass? Aye, that band, they were good. You remember it. What is it? It's like, is that the band where they had like a black Stratocaster? It's like, oh, did they? Aye. Or it's like, oh, he's got a slash type Les Paul. Boring. Whereas having that, it would get remembered. So you could easily just paint this one. What I did was I just put tape on it, covered it in masking tape, and then cut off half of it, and then painted the whole thing orange. How did I do it? I can't remember how I did that one. Did I paint the whole thing black? I might have painted the whole thing black, and then taped it off, and then cut off the black bits, and then painted the rest of it orange, or left the black bits on. No, I think I must have done it the other way around. I painted it all orange, then I taped it up, then I cut these bits out. Actually, I've made a bit of an error with that. I've got it in a horrible gig bag, a Ritter one, and actually I had to peel it off the bass when it was taken out. I was like, oh, the bass isn't coming out, and it was like, because the rubber in the gig bag has reacted with the paint. That's not a good thing. So that gig bag, if anyone's buying a bass off me, it might come in that gig bag, which is horrid. It's like a bin bag with a zip, but it reacts with the paint, and it's like pretty much failing as a gig bag. Even though it's made by Ritter, which is a decent company. They make good ones, but this one is just atrocious. So I would rather just not have it in a gig in a bag rather than have it in something that's going to attack the paint. Yeah, so fantastic bass. Rock on, buy it. You will not be disappointed. Catch you later.